used to be that people who couldn't succeed at raising venture capital would bootstrap instead. Today, it seems like people who can't bootstrap, they raise venture capital instead. The best founders are really building traction, building their business, showing product market fit, and then only going to investors if that is the gasoline that must be added to the fuel, to the fire. So number one takeaway, I think, is just remember that if you build it, they will come. Choose your favorite. Mark Cuban says sales cures all. Steve Martin says be so good they can't ignore you. Take one of those pieces of advice, build a great business, build something people will pay for, and I think fundraising will take care of itself.
This podcast is sponsored by Pragmatic Solutions, the player account management platform chosen by today's smart betting and gaming operators. Don't let technical constraints delay you from achieving your business goals. Expand your business, boost your margins, and dominate the market in any leading regulated jurisdiction with our powerful, flexible, and secure iGaming platform. Enjoy its extensive marketing tools, compliance protection, real-time data, and a wide portfolio of over 1,000 industry providers. It's time to upgrade your technology. Let Pragmatic Solutions show you the modern approach. Visit pragmatic.solutions and join the smart thinkers.
This podcast is brought to you by Pragmatic Play, a leading game developer providing player favorites to the most successful brands across the industry. With an award-winning multi-product portfolio of slots, live casino, bingo, virtual sports, and more, Pragmatic Play is powering up new possibilities of play through one single API. Visit pragmaticplay.com and discover your favorite every time.
Welcome to the Vested Interest podcast that we are doing live today. This is a podcast that me, myself, Benjie, and Lloyd have been producing on a monthly basis over the last year or so, I believe, almost.
More than a year.
More than a year now, yeah.
I think it's like 2 years?
It's been so much fun. It went by so fast.
Yeah.
Time is flying. But for those of you who haven't seen the Vested Inter podcast, it is a podcast where we talk about the trials and tribulations of being a startup founder, which is the voice that I represent, together with two of the most experienced investors in the North American iGaming landscape here with Lloyd Danzig and Benjie Cherniak. So today we have only 20 minutes, so we're gonna jump straight into it. So Lloyd, starting with you. You know, you've been part of many different fundraising processes as an investor. You've seen hundreds, maybe thousands of pitch decks even. You've been in meetings with founders that are asking you for money on a consistent basis. And so I'm sure that you've seen a lot of failures, let's say, from these type of processes. So I wanted to start to ask you, as a founder, when you go through the fundraising process, what are the biggest mistakes that founders must avoid?
I think there's probably some obvious ones: not knowing your numbers, not being prepared, not having done prior research on the investor to be able to make relevant comments, not understanding how you would fit into their portfolio, not having thought through the story and how you tell it. But I think really categorically, one of the biggest mistakes when I zoom out that I see founders make is they kind of forget what their job is, or they think that fundraising is like this separate activity or this game that they need to play well, when really your job is to build something that people want and will pay for. And if you do that, pretty much everything will take care of itself. Going to conferences and listening to podcasts and being on podcasts and going to networking events is all great. Publicity, I think, can be a really powerful factor in helping to develop competitive pressure in a fundraising round or in a commercial agreement. But really, your job as a founder is to build something that people want and will pay you for, whether it's consumers or businesses. And I think if you do that, all the rest of the fundraising stuff takes care of itself. And so I'd say one mistake I sometimes see people make is they kind of decouple that. They focus on their business, they try to grow their business. Mentally, they have almost like a separate process of, we're going to go out, we're going to fundraise, we're going to use that money to help build the level of success that we think will attract future investors. And maybe another way to just frame this that I've seen, especially as the cost of capital environment has changed, I saw someone say the other day that it used to be that people who couldn't succeed at raising venture capital would bootstrap instead. Today, it seems like people who can't bootstrap, they raise venture capital instead. The best founders are really building traction, building their business, showing product market fit, and then only going to investors if that is the gasoline that must be added to the fuel, to the fire. So number one takeaway, I think, is just remember that if you build it, they will come. Choose your favorite. Mark Cuban says sales cures all. Steve Martin says be so good they can't ignore you. Take one of those pieces of advice, build a great business, build something people will pay for, and I think fundraising will take care of itself.
And what does Benjie Cherniak say?
I agree with that to a certain extent. I think fundraising doesn't just take care of itself per se. It's still a process and still something you got to plan for, and still something that's going to be a living, breathing, moving dynamic as you work your way through the fundraising process. But to me, the biggest mistake that I often see is really relating to a founder's focus on their valuation, a founder's focus on raising capital at a specific valuation, or in even worse than that, raising at too high a valuation. And we're seeing right now by the side of the highway a lot of the dead bodies of companies that raised a way too high a valuation in 2020, 2021, when the market was at its peak. And when you raise at that high a valuation at that time in price, you're now playing catch up to try and grow into that valuation as the market dynamics shift, and it just becomes a pretty difficult game to play. And I think that when you're a founder and getting going, you should be focusing on who are the right people to be along with you in the journey. Who do you want to surround yourself with on the cap table? Who are the group of investors, and most importantly, the lead investor, but the group of investors that align with you and see the journey in a way that's synergistic with you, and see the trends of the industry and of where you're headed in a synergistic manner, and who see the way that you approach the world in a similar manner as possible. I think those are all attributes that will assist you in getting to where you want to go, but the valuation really should be secondary. The market should dictate it, and you're going to scare away investors if you come in too high, and it's a mistake I see time and time again, and repeated time and time again.
To add to that, I think many founders in the short term think that all of their interests are best served by the highest valuation possible. You take on the least dilution, you get to tell your employees that the valuation grew and that their shares are worth more, you get to put out a press release with a nice, beautiful number in it. But actually, I think even those very founders end up finding they were not well suited by that decision. Just a few months later, when to Benjie's point, they sometimes find themselves having to play catch up and having to increase revenue 5x in 12 months just to hope that they can raise a flat round. And that is not a fun way to go about running a business. I heard an investor give a founder a piece of advice recently and said, you should never raise money at a valuation higher than what you are confident you could sell the business at today in the current market. That number is usually much lower than what founders target from a Series A or B valuation perspective. But I think it is probably actually the right advice when coupled with Benjie's comment about optimizing, not for dilution, but for the quality of the folks who hopefully see the world the same way and can truly be additive and de-risking to your business.
It seems counterintuitive, as you explained, Lloyd, to not raise as the highest valuation that you possibly can. But as you point out, then it's more about thinking further, thinking about potentially another round in the future, or what happens after the round, essentially.
But there's exceptions to it also, right? Like if you have a deal and you've dotted your I's and crossed your T's, and you found some real product market fit, and you've done some really good bootstrapping to get far enough down the field that you've got a really attractive value proposition that has the eyes of all sorts of venture capitalists and strategic angels, and you're going to be an oversubscribed deal and you're high in demand. Now you got to find that balance of having the right people while ensuring you protect the equity, right? So you got to just be realistic and know where you are on the football field as you're heading into the fundraising process. And to Lloyd's point earlier, in those scenarios, the money becomes more of a foregone conclusion, and it becomes more a game strategically of cap table management. Who are the right people, and how do the pieces of a puzzle fit together?
I'll just add to that. I know we have other topics, but there are many other mechanisms that founders can and I think should use in the event they find themselves as oversubscribed, as Benjie describes, without necessarily increasing the valuation. So we saw a deal, for example, it was a really hot deal. They had more than enough interest at a $20 million valuation, and they got enough investors to agree that if the founders generated in excess of a 5x return in 5 years, 6x in 6 years, or 7x in 7 years, that the seed investors would retroactively get diluted as if they had invested at a $35 million valuation rather than 20. Now, I hated that. I think that is antithetical to the venture capital perspective of wanting unlimited upside. But you know what? They had more than enough interest in that round to pull that off. And without changing the valuation, if things don't go so well, all they have to do is get over the hurdle of the 20 million. But if things go swimmingly and they just knock it out of the park, they have a nice ratchet mechanism that they built in on the basis of that exact supply-demand dynamic that Benjie referred to. So I definitely don't think people should ignore the demand if they are oversubscribed, but I would suggest contemplating mechanisms other than the valuation itself that can help you achieve whatever future upside you're looking for while making sure you're just not setting yourself up for a really big headache and challenging time trying to raise a flat or a down round.
I want to move forward here. So say that you manage to go through the fundraising process in a successful way. You raise the capital and you eventually build a successful business. At what point should you as a founder start considering potential M&A? When is the right time to sell your business, Benjie?
Well, you're not going to like my answer, Pierre. There is no right time, right? The right time to sell your business is when you sell your business, right? Now, that being said, there's a whole bunch of things that you need to consider as a founder when you consider the process of selling a business, be it based on an inbound inquiry where you weren't even thinking about selling your business, versus going through a process where you're preparing your business for the process of being sold. But either way, whether it's an inbound unexpected or something you're planning for, you need to pivot your mindset in a meaningful way. And I think that a critical piece for all founders as they entertain M&A is difficult, right? Selling your business is it's a time-consuming, a grueling, an emotional roller coaster of a process, and there's just no way around that, right? You'll find the 1 in 100 deals where everything goes smoothly, but even those are going to have their ups and downs. And when you're in the process of doing an M&A and selling your business, you can rest assured that there'll be at least 3, 4, or 5 occasions where you're sure the deal is dead before it gets revived and the business gets sold. And I say this from experience, having sold a company and been involved in M&A of companies that I'm involved in and advising that have sold. So, you need to be emotionally prepared for the roller coaster and the ups and downs that will come with an M&A process. And that would be there's 100 other things I can get into, but that would be my first foundational piece as it pertains to M&A.
Yeah, I think that's all right. Nothing is done until it's done. I think you pretty much have to assume that any earn-out payments will never be paid and that you're comfortable with the terms even without those. I think from an investor standpoint, the answer to the question is probably something like you sell the company when you have an offer that you believe achieves the greatest revenue multiple that company will ever be able to achieve. In theory, something like that is the answer to the question, when is the best deal economically or when is the best time to sell? I think the more complicated question is really from the founders' perspective themselves, even ignoring hopefully all their great investors who they want to pay back. I love the story of Facebook when Peter Thiel and Mark Zuckerberg received $1 billion offer from Yahoo to buy the company, and it was like 15 people, and Mark Zuckerberg was 22 or 23 years old, and there was only 3 people on the board, and they got together, and one of the questions that Peter Thiel asked to Mark Zuckerberg is, if you sell the company, what will you do next? And Mark Zuckerberg said, honestly, I think I'd probably go start another social network, and I kind of like the one that I already have. And on that basis, they said, all right, let's stay. And obviously, Peter Thiel is in a different financial perspective than many investors are in terms of being able to take that additional risk. But I think from a purely economical standpoint, there's some like revenue multiple or EBITDA multiple answer there. From the founder's perspective, I really think it's a great question to ask yourself, what will I do next? Yeah. And if you find that answer being, I want to start the same company again, maybe that's actually a good reason or an indication that you're on a good track and maybe it's not quite time to sell.
So deciding the time to sell your business is maybe not so much about where the business is at the moment, but more where you are as a founder. Maybe that is the more important question.
Well,
or at least equal.
I think there's a bit of that, right? If you're a founder and you see a pipeline where there's some potential deals that could come your way, and if you stick it out another year, 2 years, 3 years, you feel that you could achieve a more optimal value as per the formula that Lloyd describes a little bit earlier in terms of the revenue multiple, but you don't necessarily know if you as a founder have the energy or the headspace or the emotional bandwidth to perform at the level that would be required to achieve that over the next 2 or 3 years. Then the bird in the hand versus two in the bush. These are personal decisions that there's no right or wrong answer to, but that as a founder, you want to be pretty honest with yourself about.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's like the opposite or the inverse of the Zuckerberg situation. He loved doing it so much, he could only imagine him doing that. I think being honest with yourself about how much work it will require, I think especially when it comes to some smaller M&A opportunities that founders can maybe be a little resistant to. They had like some big shiny number in their head when they started the company. I would advise, especially early young founders, I can't overstate how valuable it is to get one on the scoreboard. To have the market know that you started a company and sold it successfully, regardless of what the terms are. And so if you are feeling tired and it's not a business you're ultra passionate about, I think the value beyond the finances of getting a successful transaction, becoming part of that elite circle of founders who have not just started a company, but exited, I think especially for a young founder who wants to stay in entrepreneurship, that is a very often underappreciated asset to add to the resume.
Right, and it leads to kind of when you go into the next fundraising process, you have that story behind you, right? And you as investors, you don't necessarily look at only the business plan or the pitch deck, but you look a lot on who the founder is.
Look, it's a great point. If you're a career entrepreneur, then what the result is on the first business isn't as relevant as that you got one under your belt. Not that different from when you started your first fund, Lloyd, and now you're onto your second fund. The first fund was about getting something going and under the belt, and of course you want to maximize the ROI for all your investors, but you move on to your second fund and it's bigger and better, and arguably in 4 years from now, if there's fund 3, it'll be bigger and better than fund 2, right? So it's a similar dynamic. If you're a career entrepreneur, look, I think that for most entrepreneurs, not all, you have the Mark Zuckerberg examples, but I would view that as a bit of an outlier. For most entrepreneurs, whatever your North Star number was or is, I think close enough has to be good enough, right? When you start getting down the M&A process, you're likely going to find that the closer you get to the finish line, the big bad behemoth of a company that's buying you is going to skim the table in one way or another. So there's going to come a point where you feel a little bit, not betrayed, but it's just the nature of the beast, where as you're going down that path, they uncover something in their due diligence that requires that they shave $1 here or restructure something there. And I think that's all par for the course and part of what this journey involves.
Brilliant. So speaking of your fund, Lloyd, I would love to hear from you guys. Obviously, you are both two of the most successful investors in the space in the last couple of years. You know the industry inside out. I would love to hear some of the most exciting investments that you have in your respective portfolios, perhaps Lloyd. And can you also maybe give some context on where the market is right now? Where are the opportunities? And
I don't like to give context on where the opportunities are because it makes it seem like I know where they are, and I don't think I do. I look for founders who tell me where the opportunities are and why they are uniquely situated to pursue an opportunity that I'm not looking at. In terms of a couple exciting companies, one I'll mention here just because we haven't really announced it and we invested a while ago and just quietly threw it up on our website, but I highly recommend people download the app and check out Triumph Arcade or Triumph GG. I think they are the single best team building hyper-casual, mobile, skill-based games that are very different from what is often thought of in the Papaya Gaming, Playtika type skill-based social casino. They're 21-year-old Stanford dropouts who just have a completely different view. They are games that I wish I could play for free offline because I truly enjoy the gameplay so much. And I think they provide an amazing window into what some real new thinkers from a different angle could potentially bring from a UX and product perspective here. The other one I won't mention just yet because we haven't announced, but we have been spending a lot of time in what is sometimes called the competitive socialization or entertainment space. Top golf for basketball, baseball, soccer, carnival games, cricket, clay shooting, you name it, it all exists. They are all fun to visit. They are not all investable. There are a few opportunities we have been targeting, and one in particular that we'll be announcing later on that we think is going to be one of the coolest, most successful of these type of venues, and is going to dovetail with what a lot of the tribal and casino groups here are doing. So download and check out Triumph if you want to see what I think is the single best team building product in the space today, and stay tuned for an announcement in the Top Golf for X category in the coming months.
Ready?
Yeah, I mean, these are obviously up-and-coming verticals and up-and-coming companies, and a lot of excitement around a number of different types of I'm going to go the other route and talk about a company in my portfolio that's actually also in your portfolio, that I think the stars are just really aligned for our buddy Tomasz over at Kiro Sports. And Kiro Sports is a company in the micro market space, in the micro betting space, and a competitor to Simple Bet, if you will, that just sold to DraftKings. And Kiro is on a really good trajectory regardless of the DraftKings situation, because they were building a product that's got some real product market fit on the global stage with a very strong, European football focused micro betting product. And now with Simple Bet becoming the property of DraftKings and kind of leaving the B2B and becoming a one home shop, it opens up a world of opportunity in the US that I think Kiro has become uniquely positioned to capitalize on. And look, B2C has always got, or almost always got, a greater TAM potential than B2B, right? But I think that this is one B2B company that is beginning to rise above the cream of the crop in our space, and one that I would keep an eye on.
Brilliant, guys. That's all we have time for today. By the way, Lloyd, looking at your socks, I mean, we have to step up our socks game in the next panel here. Bugs Bunny.
Bugs Bunny.
I like it, man.
I think I got Tasmanian Devil for tomorrow.
Brilliant, guys. If you ever want to check out the Vested Inter podcast, go to next.io on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's been great to have you guys in person here today. Thank you, Lloyd. Thank you, Benjie. See you guys online.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you.